Yeah, I'm just wondering, what is your final impression about this writer, this William Shakespeare? We've had a chance to really dive deep into his works. Now it's like 12 out of maybe 38 plays in toto. We've certainly not totally encompassed his work, but I'm just thinking that over these 12 weeks, we've probably seen some of the key works of his career, and we've seen tragedies, we've seen comedies, we've seen histories, we've seen romances, and I'm wondering if you have noticed certain things, certain characteristics, certain topics, certain styles that just seem to keep, I don't know, recurring from play to play. Certain aspects of his, his theatrical techniques, of his poetic style that maybe impressed you. That you say that maybe this is something that we can say is characteristic of this writer that you just don't find so much in other writers. So I'd just like to open the floor, if you want to unmute yourselves to contribute. If you'd like to offer your thoughts about, some of the key characteristics about Shakespeare's dramatic writing that you feel ought to be noted, and if you thought that this was really impressed on you through watching these films weekly. So I see, Jim, I saw your hand up.
Overall, it doesn't seem like he really had originality with regard to the plots. However, he had originality with regard to how he put the words down on paper, and with many quotations that we still say today.
Yes, you're absolutely right. There's a few writers who are more quotable, and yes, in terms of plots, yeah, he borrowed or borrowed or stole, some of his the stories for some of his greatest plays. The Taming of the Shrew is a good example. There's a main story, this contest between Petruchio and Catherine, and that's one story, and that's a kind of an old sort of folk tale motif, that's old as the hills, and so a lot of writers say that Shakespeare took that story, of the man kind of subduing the wayward woman, simply from the folklore that he knew from his growing up. It wasn't necessarily a piece of literature that he had to borrow from. And then there's the subplot of the Taming of the Shrew, where there are all these suitors for Caterina's younger sister Bianca, and that's taken from a play by a English writer named George Gascoigne called Supposing, he basically took that subplot of Taming of the Shrew from that play by Gascoigne, Supposing. And then there's the frame around the Taming of the Shrew. And frankly, I was rather astonished to realize there was a frame around the Taming of the Shrew play. But there is this kind of what they called, what Shakespeare calls an induction, which is sort of a two-scene preface or prelude to the main play, there actually are literary sources that Shakespeare had access to, in which he took this story about a drunken sot who's thrown out of a tavern, and he's sort of falls asleep on the street, and this nobleman walks by after a good day's hunting, and he sees this terrible, derelict on the sidewalk, and he wonders, well, maybe we could have some fun with this guy. And he has his courtiers, lift this fella up and takes him to his manor, and he has him dressed up in all his nobleman's regalia, and has his court basically pretend that this derelict named Christopher Sly is truly a lord, truly a nobleman who has merely been sick for like 15 years and has suddenly gotten well and woken up. He's dreamed that he was a derelict named Christopher Sly, but he's really a nobleman. And they play this cruel trick on him. Well, this is, again, something that Shakespeare got from other sources. And, it really is astonishing, how he was able to draw from this source and that source. He took from 3 different sources to create this amazing play, The Taming of the Shrew. So there's his incredible gift of language, and as an example of that, that gift, there's another version of this play that's called, from the same basic period of time, that's called The Taming of a Shrew, not the Shrew, The Taming of a Shrew. And there's no actual author who has been determined who wrote this other Shrew play. Some people think it might be Thomas Kidd. Some people think it might be Christopher Marlowe. Some people think it might be, God forbid, Robert Greene. Some people think it might be an early draft of The Taming of the Shrew by Shakespeare himself. We, unfortunately, do not know. But, I actually found this play on the internet yesterday, and I was looking through the opening pages, and I have to tell you, there's a lot that's very much alike, very, very similar to Shakespeare's play, but the use of the language is so much more prosaic, so much less colorful, so much less characterful than Shakespeare's use of the language that, there's just no contest. You certainly might find a little bit of entertainment value in this other play, The Taming of a Shrew, but it's nowhere near as rich an experience, at least literarily speaking, compared with Shakespeare's play. His use of the language truly is of a level that really does rise above most other playwrights of his era and most other eras. Anyone else want to weigh in about things that they observed about Shakespeare's theatrical work that you might not have noticed if you hadn't seen all these plays in succession?
Well, his wit, in the it's just, the puns, and his language is so witty, and there's a lot of play between characters with words as opposed to with action sometimes, and also the changing of the people changing to be different people, the costumes, but actually become, supposedly like they're becoming different people. So they do that. They did that a lot in this play. And I read something that said the induction was because, showed what was to come, because the Sly became somebody else, a lord, and it was a precursor to the play. As well as they talked about the words hunting, they talked a lot about hunting in the induction, and of course in the play it was hunting the woman, hunting the prey.
You hear talk about the thrill of the chase,
Right.
Some people might say that, for Petruchio, some of his interest in this proposal that's brought to him to court this wild woman in Signor Battista Minolo's household. The notion that can you deal with this wild personality? I think that for Petruchio, partly it's the dowry, the monetary, but some of it is that thrill of the chase, the thrill of the contest. That there may be that kind of. Some people have this need to, the idea of doing something that's extreme. People who are involved in extreme sports, they get this rush of adrenaline by doing something that's kind of, edgy and dangerous. And I think Petruchio gets the sense that, yeah, there could be a bit of that sense in this quest for this seemingly unattainable, woman who no one else seems to be able to deal with. There may be something of that, and there's, I'm sure, some of that appeal to people who hunt. There's a lot of imagery in this play of falconry. Training, hawking, training these falcons, to be obedient to the falconer, and there's a lot of that imagery that's applied to this relationship of Petruchio and Caterina in the play. So the fact that imagery is introduced in this framing device, this induction, it kind of does feed into the main play. So it isn't completely arbitrary, which at first that's what I thought it was, simply an arbitrary thing. But no, I think there is some method to it. Jim, I see a finger up there. Yes.
So it's a learning experience. If I ever run into a wild woman, I'll know what to do.
So you're looking at this as a bit of a how-to manual. Okay. All right. There may be some didactic value. You never know. Oh my. So let's see. But just getting back to our general survey of the Shakespeare things we've seen. Any other general observations that you have about things that struck you as being kind of very characteristic of Shakespeare's work that we value? Yes, Susan.
Well, Jim noted that the plots weren't very original, but I think the character development and how the characters are portrayed is one of the strengths of Shakespeare, in addition to the language.
Okay. Yes. I mean, it goes back to that premise of Harold Bloom, the Shakespeare, the invention of the human, the notion of how he is able to create these full-bodied, three-dimensional figures who, in another playwright's hands, would be simply very two-dimensional and not very interesting. But I mean, and certainly this is very true of the protagonists, the key roles in some of his plays. But even some of the supporting characters, the people that one would normally not really give much attention to, even those relatively minor characters are really given some added dimension in Shakespeare's treatment, and I think that's one of the things that gives these plays this sense of richness, the sense that it isn't just a one-man show, that there's an entire ensemble of people who really do feel like people that you might meet. That you might meet a person with that kind of character. Even in a farce like the Taming of the Shrew, even these figures who come out of the Italian improvisatory commedia dell'arte tradition, those sort of stereotypical stock figures, even in Shakespeare's play, these figures tend to have a little more weight and a little more believability, even though they do sometimes some kind of silly, foolish things, somehow they achieve a little bit more of a sense of a real person. And that's one, to me, of one of those delights of these plays, that, there is a sense that he isn't just being a puppet master, and that imagery of puppets is sometimes brooded about in this play. I think even in a play like this, which is a putative farce, I think he really does not want to have his audience just look at these people as puppet figures, as a Punch and Judy show. I think he tries to raise up that commedia dell'arte tradition in this play, and certainly in some of his other comedies. So thank you for that. Thank you for that observation. Anybody else want to weigh in? Linda, yes. Oh, I need you on mute.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. In most of his plays, the lead character has a sidekick who helps him carry out the purpose of what he's trying to convey and what he's trying to do.
Sancho Panza.
Well, whatever. But no, but in Romeo and Juliet, he had Romeo had Mercutio, I think his name was.
Yeah.
And, in this play, Lucentio had Tranio, and Petruchio had. There's always somebody who helps the play move along, helps the character get his point across.
It never hurts for the protagonist to have a boon companion, because if you don't have anybody to talk to. You're just giving endless soliloquies to yourself, and that can get a little tiring. So yeah, it's good to have someone who not only can do the heavy lifting, but you can also bounce your ideas off that person, and then you can really develop your ideas as a character. So Petruchio has his servant character Grumio, who is a darn good sidekick. Boy, they don't come much better than that. And Lucentio, he has his serving man Tranio, and he even has another. Lucentio has the luxury of having two sidekicks, not just one. He has, oh golly, I'm blanking out on the name. He has blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so he has the servant Biondello, and he's a darn good sidekick as well. So yeah, there's a lot of that kind of thing that goes on in this play, and I think that helps to oil the gears of the plot, because sometimes the protagonists have other things to worry about than all the mundane everyday activities which these sidekicks can help them take care of. So and of course King Lear, he has his fool, and Macbeth has Banquo as his sidekick at the beginning of the play until he feels like the sidekick might want to take over his kingship, and then he has his sidekick killed. That's what happens in tragedies. These things happen. Hamlet has his Horatio, of course, a boon companion to the bitter end, and of course Cleopatra. She has her handmaidens, and I'm blanking out on their names right now, but she has two handmaidens, and she has a eunuch in her court. So she has a lot of sidekicks there. Yeah, that really helps out a lot when you have these underlings who can kind of, serve them and, be supporters of them. It's hard to go it alone in a Shakespeare play. Good to have folks that can, be or, spur you on to greater action. So yeah, I like that observation. Yes, Gail.
What about the puns and the wit? It seems like even in the tragedies, he uses that a lot, and the wordplay. And it seems to me that the English did that, like Shaw did it, and Oscar Wilde, you know, in their plays. They had a lot of, just seems like the English do that a lot it seems to me more than Americans.
Yeah,
Maybe the
yeah.
French
It may well be more an English characteristic. You know, I think you know, it really is. I think the English really are connoisseurs of the language, much more than Americans. Sad to say, and I think they appreciate a well-turned phrase. So yeah, I think that Shakespeare had this tendency almost innately, and you find this very early on in his career. This play, Taming of the Shrew, is considered one of his early comedies, and you can see this reveling in the language even in this early work. And I think this gets even stronger, you know, in his mature plays. I mean, you find it incredibly in a play like Hamlet. You certainly find it in Love's Labour's Lost. You certainly find it in Romeo and Juliet. Tremendous wordplay in that work. And it's, you know, and I'm sure there were some colleagues who felt that Shakespeare maybe overdid it with the wordplay, that he could have maybe toned it down a bit. But I think that, you know, it just wouldn't seem like Shakespeare if you didn't find that kind of density of, you know, of language usage. I think in some cases, you might say in the latter part of his career, in a play like The Tempest, I think he tries to temper that a little bit. I think he tries to simplify things, both in terms of the dramatic structure and the use of playful language. I think he tries to come to more of a you know, an eloquent simplicity in some of these final stages of his work. But certainly, as a young playwright and as a maturing playwright, I think he really does feel like I almost feel like he has to rival those supposedly sophisticated university wits who were his main rivals as playwrights in his early career. You know, the Thomas Kydds and the Christopher Marlowes and the Robert Greens, etc. I think he felt like he had to, you know, show off his smarts to be every bit as worthy in their company. So maybe he overcompensated, and that became kind of ingrained. But you know, I think there was also just this natural poetic soul, especially when he really started writing poetry seriously apart from the theater. And I think that once he had that spate of writing epic poems like Venus and Narcissus and you know, and the Rape of Lucretia and the skein of sonnets, I think that mode of expression really stayed with him even in his theatrical plays. So I think that became much more a part of his arsenal, you know, in that latter part of his career after, you know, doing that stint as poet away from the theater. Let's see, maybe one more comment about Shakespeare just in general, in terms of his general tendencies as a playwright. Yes, Marie, yes.
Yeah, it seemed like another collaboration. Sly came in to start the whole thing. Then he disappeared. Never
Yes.
to be seen again.
Yes.
But, it was a bit slapstick at parts.
Yes. There's a lot of physical humor in this play, and it starts with that induction in the beginning. Yeah, you know, in that other Taming of a Shrew play, that other version of this story, that Christopher Sly character continues on throughout the play, and he makes little side comments from the from the box where he's observing the action throughout the play. And he becomes kind of like a kibitzer, kind of like a commenter throughout this piece. It's really kind of a modern conception to have him do that. It's almost like a Bertolt Brecht having a commenting figure throughout the play. And Shakespeare, he kind of drops it after Christopher Sly makes a comment at the end of the first scene. He kind of fades away to just being an observer. And critics have been scratching their heads for 400 years, wondering why Shakespeare decided not to have those sly comments continue on interspersed throughout the play. We'll never know. But yeah, that's a very good point you make. Maybe just one more point for me before going on. I do think that one of the interesting characteristics of Shakespeare as a playwright is the fact that you really do not have such a thing as a pure tragic play or a pure comedic play. It seems to me there always is, in the most tragic of tragedies, there's always something that's a little light, a little humorous in the proceedings. He's always providing you a certain amount of contrast to the major dramatic or tragic burden of the play in question. And we've been seeing largely the tragic side of Shakespeare in this series. We've just had a little bit of the comedies. And I find it uncanny that even in such a serious play as King Lear, we find little moments of levity. And Macbeth, I mean, as dark a play as any of Shakespeare's, you find that humorous porter walking across the stage doing knock-knock jokes. I find that, and when Cleopatra is about to die, is about to commit suicide, there's this, bearer of the basket with the asp starts doing a little comic routine before she does herself in. It's amazing. Shakespeare does these things in the most dark and tragic of circumstances. I don't know too many other playwrights who do that. Yes, Susan.
So do you think that he invented this idea of comic relief, or did he just really enjoy that and want to put that in the play?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I don't know so much about Shakespeare's predecessors, but I have a feeling that probably it was not quite as big a characteristic of other playwrights. I think this is one of the things that gives his plays that very unique stamp. It gives his plays a certain kind of realism, because you find in life, you find in the most serious of circumstances, you find sudden, strange occurrences of the absurd shooting through, a very serious situation. And I think that Shakespeare is simply drawing from everyday observance, everyday experience, and say, well, why can't we have a clown traipsing through some tragic occurrence in one of these plays? Why would the audience throw vegetables and fruit if I did that? They might welcome the relief. They might welcome the variety. So I think just simply being a member of a working acting troupe, having to perform for players, having to perform for audiences day after day, it honed his theatrical instincts, and it honed his notion that we don't want to bore the audiences by having simply one color all the way through a play. That if we vary the shades a bit, we will keep the audience more engaged, so they won't be sitting back in their seats on their benches, saying ho hum, you know, we're just going to get 20 more minutes of this thing, you know, rather than going forward in their chairs and saying, I wonder what's going to happen next, because Shakespeare keeps changing it up all the time. I think there was that sense of being a very practical man of the theater and realizing that you've got to keep the viewers engaged. And that's one of the ways you do it, by constantly mixing up the moods of the piece. And I think Shakespeare does this better than almost anybody else in terms of theater. Yes, Linda.
I was thinking of the groundlings who had to stand and watch the play because they couldn't afford to have the seats. Maybe some of this was put in for them.
Well, very true, very true. You not only had to be worrying about that kind of attention, you had to be worrying about the different classes who were attending the play. You had people in the boxes who paid a good amount of money for their privileges of not being rained on during the proceedings. And you had the groundlings who couldn't even get a seat. They had to stand for the entire thing. And they were probably more from the lower class. And of course, different sensibilities. Yeah, so you had people who were absolutely correct. You had people who had no ear for poetry, but they did have an eye for a good sight gag. So you had to have the high-flown poetry for the very learned, the very literate, people who were well-read. And you had to have the fall on your ass physical humor for the groundlings, as you called them. You know, the people who were on the ground, on their feet, and did not necessarily have any reading and writing instructions, and were simply there to be able to pass an afternoon in a very amused way. So yes, he had to appeal to a number of different audience sensibilities. And that's another reason why his plays had to be as varied as they were. So very good point observed and point taken. Now, among the comedies that we find in Shakespeare's works, we find a certain category of comedy that critics have called problem plays. And we really have not come across that yet in this film festival up to this point. When we talk about problem plays, I think you probably have to say that, yeah, okay, tragedy, it's where everybody dies at the end. Okay, comedy, it's where everyone gets married at the end. So yeah, there are these comedies, these plays where people get married at the end, but it's not unalloyed joy at the end of some comedies. There are some comedies where there's some occurrence or there's some issue that causes discomfort in the viewers, that there's a sense of unpleasantness about the storyline that is not entirely assuaged or smoothed over by all the multifarious marriages that conclude the piece. There's something, a certain kind of gnawing unease that remains at the end of the play, even though it is overtly called a comedy. So I think the two plays most Shakespeare lovers, think of when you hear the term problem play, it's probably Measure for Measure and All's Well That Ends Well, both of which are in the more difficult mode in terms of comedies that, again, have a certain kind of, just a certain queasy feeling we have about some of the subjects or some of the actions that are given in that play. So those, I'd say, are his most prominent of these problem plays. But there are other pieces that are listed as comedies that still have that quality, I think. I think one of them is The Merchant of Venice. This aspect of portraying, for one of the first times on the English stage, the Jew, the figure of the Jew, I think Christopher Marlowe maybe got there before him. But in both cases, in Marlowe's case and in Shakespeare's case, it's a not terribly flattering view of the Jewish people, and people have cavilled at Shakespeare's treatment for the 400 years since that play first came on board, and a lot of people have blamed Shakespeare for perhaps instilling anti-Semitism in people, whether playgoers or not, all these many years later. It's a thing we still have problems with when we see this play, The Merchant of Venice. There's actually a book that I've not yet read. I think it's by James Shapiro, and it's called Shakespeare and the Jews. And I think it deals specifically with his treatment of Shylock in The Merchant of Venice. I'll be reading that with great interest as we conclude this seminar. So that's a play that, even though it's not overtly called one, I definitely put this in that category of problem play. And by golly, I think as farcical and as slapsticky as it is, I think The Taming of the Shrew also has to be put in this category for an entirely different reason, and that is because of its portrayal of gender in this play. And I think to make it a long story short, I think it all comes down to the very action that's in the title, The Taming of the Shrew. It's that very action that fills many people, and particularly women, with a certain kind of dis-ease. Now, first of all, let's do a little definition here. So the very word shrew, what is it? So first of all, there's the one meaning you could give it, which is the animal shrew. So does anyone know what that is, the animal? Yes, Susan.
Well, it's a rodent. It's like a sort of like a mouse or a vole, but it's I don't know what kind of environment they inhabit, but it's a type of rodent.
Okay, thank you very much. I didn't know that. See, this is a very educational subject here. So this is what I get from our friend Wikipedia. It says that it's a small mole-like mammal, and it says although its external appearance is generally that of a long-nosed mouse, it says a shrew is not a rodent as mice are. It is in fact much closer a relative of hedgehogs and moles. And shrews are related to rodents only to the extent that both belong to, I can't even pronounce this name, Boreotheria magnorder. Oh, damn. Well, anyway, it's like a mouse, but it's not quite a rodent. And it says shrews have sharp, spike-like teeth, not the familiar gnawing front incisor teeth of rodents. And it says they're tiny, no longer than a mouse. Now here's one thing that I saw about shrews. It says that they are fiercely territorial. They drive off rivals and come together only to mate. So I guess shrews are very good at social distancing. Let's see, many dig burrows for catching food and hiding from predators, although this is not universal. And this is interesting. Unlike most mammals, some species of shrews are venomous. Shrew venom is not conducted into the wound by fangs, but by grooves in the teeth. The venom contains various compounds, and the contents of the venom glands of the American short-tailed shrew are sufficient to kill 200 mice by intravenous injection. Pretty powerful. Now, on the positive side, it says that one chemical extracted from shrew venom may be potentially useful in the treatment of high blood pressure, while another compound may be useful in the treatment of some neuromuscular diseases and migraines. So, some kudos to some shrews and some of their venoms. Anyways, be that as it may, we're not concerned about that kind of shrew. We are concerned about the human kind of shrew. So, according to Wikipedia, again, the shrew is, and I'm quoting now, this is not my opinion, the shrew, an unpleasant, ill-tempered woman characterized by scolding, nagging, and aggression. And this is a comedic stock character in literature and folklore, both Western and Eastern. And then it says, the theme is illustrated in Shakespeare's play, The Taming of the Shrew. So this is like Exhibit 1 for what is a shrew in terms of the human version of it. Now what's interesting about this word is that, at first, this was simply a word that could be used for either men or women. It was simply denoting a certain kind of vehement, attitude, especially in terms of the use of the language and the tone of the voice, this kind of verbal disagreeableness, that this could be characteristic of a man as well. So in terms of the history, it says that shrew derives from Middle English shrew for evil or scolding person. So used since at least the 11th century. And it says it might even derive from an Old English skriawa or skriawa. And to me, that sounds like the word scream. And you can imagine there is a lot of screaming that goes on in shrews. And obviously this is connected with the animal as well. So it says historically connected with the animal that shrews were superstitiously feared, falsely believed to have a venomous bite and to behave aggressively and with cruelty, leading to the obsolete word beshrew, which I think you still find in Shakespeare a bit, I think, that use. So it says that by the middle of the 16th century, the opposing extremes of wifely personality traits were contrasted as shrew versus sheep. So the contrast between someone who could be, controlled, like a sheep could be controlled by a shepherd, contrasted with a shrew, an animal who is not able to be controlled as well. Someone who is, has this notion of someone with a venomous bite to behave aggressively. So in modern day terms, or at least around Shakespeare's time, this word was being used to describe a woman who had this kind of venomous ability to attack with words, not necessarily with fists or with other kind of physicality, but with the way they used the language or the way they used their tone of voice. So this becomes a stock character in the comedies of the day. So just like there are other stock characters like the foolish old man or the gullible servant or the callow romantic youth, so there was this very unpleasant aggressive female character that populated these commedia dell'arte style comedies, the shrew character. And it was used purely for comedic effect, probably to provide a kind of comedic antagonist for one of the other characters, and to take part in the kind of raucous byplay, the kind of slapstick occurrences that would go on in those kinds of wild comedies, particularly in the Italian commedia dell'arte tradition. Now, I think generally speaking, we don't have people railing against commedia dell'arte comedies for the most part now today. I don't think people necessarily take placards and march in the streets against farces or slapstick comedies. I don't know that people necessarily protest against the Three Stooges for doing violent, cruel slapstick, mainly because we don't really care about these characters in farce and slapstick for the most part, because we know that it's completely unreal. We know that these characters couldn't possibly exist in real life. We know that the violence and cruelty that goes on in that kind of comedy, it's not to be taken seriously at all. It's completely artificial, and it's just like the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. You don't really care that Wile E. Coyote falls off the cliff umpteen dozen times in a Roadrunner cartoon. You'll know that he'll be back for more. That's just the nature of that kind of comedy. So it is with this kind of, very rough-hewn commedia dell'arte tradition. Yes, Jim.
Oh,
I wonder what you would call the male counterpart of a shrew.
guess we didn't see any.
Yeah, that's a real good question. I'm sorry, I heard another comment. Yes.
No, I'll wait.
Okay. So, I think even in Shakespeare's time, you could legitimately call a man a shrew, and people would get your meaning. Someone who is full of all sorts of bombast and bluster. You could legitimately use that word interchangeably. And I think it's only post Shakespeare and post Taming of the Shrew that you start getting the sense that it's really directed mainly toward women. So yeah, I will have to come up with a good term for the male counterpart. That I'm just going to say blowhard for now. I think that's a pretty good way to describe the male counterpart. Now, why do we get so anxious about the treatment of Caterina in the Taming of the Shrew? Why this play above all do we start to really start to have great trepidation about the way she is treated in this particular play, whereas in another bit of farcical slapstick, in another piece where we might not care at all. We might not even understand what the problem is. Whereas with Taming of the Shrew, we definitely often do have a problem with the treatment of this character. Susan, yes.
Maybe it has to do with her final speech in the play.
Okay, yes, bingo, yes. So,
And it was interesting because I was reading Harold Bloom's article about this play, and he claims that this final speech is generally misinterpreted, and that a really good actress can bring out a countertone
okay.
to the play. And I watched really carefully in this presentation from the Shakespeare Festival, and I didn't get anything from the actor's portrayal of this final scene that had any other flavor to it, like
Okay.
suggests. So
Okay.
I'm wondering
Well, I think it really all comes down to this final speech. That really, this has really caused a great uproar for the last 400 years. And, George Bernard Shaw, when he saw this play in the 1897, he wrote in a review of a performance of this play, he said that no man with any decency of feeling can sit it out in the company of a woman without being extremely ashamed of the Lord of creation moral implied in the wager and the speech put into the woman's own mouth. This is 1897. He's saying that, and he also says that he says about the play as in general. He says that the play is one vile insult to womanhood and manhood from the first word to the last.
Mm.
I mean, attacks on this play don't come more withering than that. So this discomfort with Taming of the Shrew, this notion of this piece as not your average knockabout farce, your average knockabout battle of the sexes, but as something that is truly problematic in the Shakespeare critics' use of the term, is it's a real consideration for us to deal with, that we really have to grapple with it. So let's listen to this speech, and then we'll listen to the speech, and then we will have our choice of 4 different ways that we could react to this speech. Okay, 4 different ways that we could take this message of Katharina at the end of the play. Yes, Gail, I see your hand.
I just want to say something before you do that. I tried reading a lot of different things because it's really, it's numbing, to listen to the last speech. Yes. And, a lot of folks were saying that it's about power, and as well as gender.
Okay.
And that, she does have some power in what she's in her speech. She has power in and it was kind of like in the, well, I live in the South now. I'm from Buffalo, and it's kind of like one of my friends said to me, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission, and I was never taught that, but it kind of reminded me of that, that you really just go along, but you do what you want to do. Does that make sense? And so you have a power in that.
Okay.
And I guess that's kind of what the critics that I read were saying, that she does have a power because she's giving in, but she's kind of in charge. It's sort of I don't know, it's a strange concept, but
well,
Southern women really do have a have a way about that, if you like steel magnolias, that kind of thing, that they, so I don't know, but
well, that certainly is a plausible point of view, and I'm sure there are actresses who have played this part who have tried to perform it in that way. Let's hear the speech, okay? So the context is that Petruchio, by the way, another problematic aspect of this play is, how do you pronounce the protagonist's name? Is it Petruchio or is it Petruchio? Yeah. I've seen it and advised both ways. And all I can say is potato, patata, tomato, tomato. Let's call the whole thing off. You pronounce it like the way you want to. I'm going to say Petruchio. That's just the way I'm used to it. Yes.
It is, because the Italian, the CH makes the I, CI would be cheek.
It's a soft sound. That's right.
Makes it
okay. Anyways,
that's
I've seen it spelled different ways. So if it's spelled a different way, then it would be Petruchio. But anyway, I'm going with Petruchio, and sue me if you don't like it. So anyway, the context is that in the final act, Petruchio is bringing Caterina back to the home of the, back to Padua. They're going to celebrate the marriage of Bianca, the youngest daughter of Battista Minolo, to I'm sorry, blanking out on that guy's name. Lucentio, being married to Lucentio, and also another character, Hortensio, who is also wooing Bianca. He has got married to a rich widow, so it's like a double marriage in a way. And then with Petruchio and Caterina coming back, they also are at this wedding feast, and Petruchio is making a little wager with his fellow grooms. He's making a wager as to which of the brides can be most obedient. They think, well, we can make a little easy money off of Petruchio. This is not going to be at all close. So, and they simply ask for this contest for each of these ladies, each of these brides, to be brought into the room. And so Lucentio, he asks for his bride to come to the room, and she says she's too busy, she's not coming. And then Hortensio asks for his bride, this rich widow, to come into the room, and she also fobs off some excuse. Maybe you didn't ask nicely enough, and she refuses to come into the room. And then Petruchio asks the servant to ask Caterina to come into the room, and she does. Lo and behold, she does. And the other grooms are gape-mouthed in surprise. And Petruchio then says, Caterina, would you please escort Bianca and the widow into the room with you? And she does just that. And then Petruchio asks Caterina to tell what he calls these headstrong women, what duty they owe their lords and husbands. Well, and then comes the longest speech in the play, with Caterina giving the speech. And this is the speech that has gnawed at people's consciousnesses for the last 400 years. She says to these women, "Fie, fie, unknit that threatening, unkind brow, and dart not scornful glances from those eyes to wound thy lord, thy king, thy governor. It blots thy beauty as frosts do bite the meads, confounds thy fame as whirlwinds shake fair buds, and in no sense is meet or amiable. A woman moved is like a fountain troubled, muddy, ill-seeming, thick, bereft of beauty. And while it is so, none so dry or thirsty will deign to sip or touch one drop of it. Thy husband is thy lord, thy life, thy keeper, thy head, thy sovereign, one that cares for thee, and for thy maintenance, commits his body to painful labor, both by sea and land, to watch the night in storms, the day in cold, whilst thou liest warm at home, secure and safe, and craves no other tribute at thy hands but love, fair looks, and true obedience. Too little payment for so great a debt." Just parenthetically speaking, this is one time I am glad to be on Zoom for a class, because I know by this time, if this were being said live, there would be lots of fruits and vegetables being flung at my head, even as I speak. So thank God for merely virtual fruits and vegetables in this case. Anyway, I continue on. Too little payment for so great a debt. Such duty as a subject owes the prince, even such a woman oweth to her husband. And when she is froward, peevish, sullen, sour, and not obedient to his honest will, what is she but a foul contending rebel and a graceless traitor to her loving lord? I am ashamed that women are so simple to offer war where they should kneel for peace, or seek for rule, supremacy, and sway when they are bound to serve, love, and obey. Why are our bodies soft and weak and smooth, unapt to toil and trouble in the world, but that our soft conditions and our hearts should well agree with our external parts? Come, come, you froward and unable worms. My mind hath been as big as one of yours, my heart as great, my reason haply more, to bandy word for word and frown for frown. But now I see our lances are but straws, our strength as weak, our weakness past compare, that seeming to be most, which we indeed least are. Then veil your stomachs, for it is no boot, and place your hands below your husband's foot, in token of which duty, if he please, my hand is ready. May it do him ease. And that's the troubling speech. Now, in the Wikipedia article about Taming of the Shrew, it says, talking about the critical troubles about this monologue, it says, critically, 4 main theories have emerged in response to Katharina's speech. 1, it is sincere. Petruchio has successfully turned her, successfully tamed her. Number 2, it is sincere, but not because Petruchio has tamed her. Instead, she has fallen in love with him and accepted her role as his wife. Choice 3, it is ironic. She is being sarcastic, pretending to have been tamed when in reality she has completely duped Petruchio into thinking he has tamed her. This was the choice, I think, in the first sound film version of Taming of the Shrew, starring of all people, Mary Pickford, against Douglas Fairbanks Sr. as Petruchio. Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart, as Kate. That seems a bit of miscasting. Well, in any case, when she gave her performance, she gave a big wink on camera to Bianca in the film. So you know that she's speaking ironically in that case. So that's the Mary Pickford version. And finally, number 4, it should not be read seriously or ironically. It is simply part of the farcical nature of the play within the play. Okay, so there are your main choices. I don't know, maybe there's a 5th or 6th that they haven't thought of yet. But you've heard the speech. You've got your personal reaction to the piece. Again, in advance, I want to apologize to the ladies. This can't have been pleasant to listen to. But as you receive this message, as I've given it in my halting way, as you've heard Deborah Hay say it on this film, or as you've heard Elizabeth Taylor say it in Franco Zeffirelli's film from 1967, I think, or any other version of the piece that you've seen, what do you think? Do you think it is completely sincere? Do you think he has truly tamed Caterina? Do you think it's sincere, but because she has fallen in love with Petruchio in the process? Or do you believe it is simply irony, it is sarcasm, and she's got her public face, but she's got her private counsel that she is keeping? Let's see. Let me just start from the top of my screen. Mary Lou, what do you think? What's your view?
I played Lady Beatrice in Much Ado About Nothing.
Okay, and people would say that Caterina is kind of like an ancestor to Beatrice in Shakespeare's work. So there is some continuity there. Okay.
And it takes me back to that back and forth with her and Benedict and other people in the the characters. And one of the things we didn't mention about typical things in Shakespearean plays is the overhearing of dialogue and other characters' observation, and then other characters getting in and manipulating. And so I almost feel like this is Caterina manipulating the audience with this ironic speech.
Okay, and also when you consider it, there is the audience that we are a part of, but she's also got this audience, these listeners on stage. And I think she's playing to those listeners as well. So I mean, and that's another way to take a look at this speech, that it is purely a performance. And that certainly is a legitimate way to look at it as well. Betty, you've got yourself unmuted. What do you think about this issue?
Well, I think all four responses are able to be understood, but I think it was a farce. And I think she was giving a farce to the audience. As Mary Lou just said, she stated what she had to state, but I think she was pulling the wool over everybody's eyes.
Okay, so this is merely the logical conclusion to this incredibly frenetic farce about love and wooing and taming and all that stuff. That this is the only way this could have ended, with this kind of a period, perhaps. Okay, all right. Ruth, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I would have felt differently maybe 50 years ago about this speech, because at that time society accepted the role of a man as Lord and Master pretty much, and the woman was more obedient, at least in my grandparents, my parents' lives. And since then we've come, one might say, a long way toward the fact that this could be considered, what the way he treated her could be considered a spousal abuse.
Exactly.
And we look at what he put her through. Yeah, I mean, that's the way I would feel today, looking at the way he treated her and what happened. However, there's also number 4 is also a good way for people today to feel. It's a kind of a cop-out. Mm-hmm. And you're judging it as a play, and so it's not real life. But there's all these things going on in my mind right now, and I don't, historically I would have said something else if you had asked me 50 years ago.
Because
I think we all might have. I'm agreeing with that. I think we all might have.
Yeah. This subject and this whole discussion would be academic if we were talking about any other kind of farce. If we were talking about a farce by Feydeau or some other playwright, we wouldn't even have we wouldn't have any reason to take this character seriously. It's only because Shakespeare has written this character, and Shakespeare has taken this character, this stock figure from Commedia dell'arte, and he has made this character a real three-dimensional human being that we can really care about.
Right.
We wouldn't be talking about spousal abuse about any other character in a typical farce, because we wouldn't even consider that a real person. But we really do think of Katerina as a real person who has real feelings. I mean, let me just go to this little spot at the end of the third act, I think, when they're about to, have this wedding. They're about to have this wedding at the end of Act 3, and Petruchio has come late to the wedding. He's leaving everyone waiting so that they can get on to the church, and everyone is thinking that maybe this is one of these guys who loves them and leaves them, who never was a sincere suitor in the first place. He's hornswoggled everybody, and Katerina, you can tell that she's really hurt. She really is hurt by this notion that this may have happened. So she says, compared with, she's comparing herself with Bianca, and she says, "Will you not suffer me? Nay, now I see she is your treasure. She must have a husband. I must dance barefoot on her wedding day, and for your love to her, and for your love to lead her apes in hell. Talk not to me. I will go sit and weep till I can find occasion of revenge." You can tell that she has really been hurt by this desertion, and it really is. It's a very hurtful thing. Well, hold on here. I think I actually was in the wrong place. Just a moment. Yes, yeah. So this is what she says. She says, "No shame but mine. I must forsooth be forced to give my hand, opposed against my heart, unto a mad-brained rudesby, full of spleen, who wooed in haste and means to wed at leisure. I told you, he was a frantic fool, hiding his bitter jests in blunt behavior, and to be noted for a merry man. He'll woo 1,000, point the day of marriage, make feast, invite friends, and proclaim the banns, yet never means to wed whoe'er he hath wooed. Now must the world point at poor Catherine and say, lo, there is mad Petruchio's wife. If it would please him, come and marry her." She is destroyed by this seemingly desertion on her wedding day. So, I think that it's only because the audience is really made to feel real sympathy for Katerina at this point in the play. That's the reason why we have to take her seriously as someone who has the ability to feel real hurt, real wounds by Petruchio's actions. At this point, this is no longer some kind of knockabout farce. This is a real comedy of character in which characters really can be hurt by other characters. In the best, most ambitious comedies, there is that ability to empathize with the characters in the comedy. And here, maybe for the first time, we do empathize with Katerina. And I think that so many of us who have empathized with that quality in her, in this character thus far, we feel, in a sense, some of us feel let down that she capitulates, that she folds under Petruchio's pressure in the final act of the play. This is not something that could happen with any other character in a farce, I think. This is Shakespeare's unique achievement, to really make us feel sympathetic to this overt shrew. Who else would like to weigh in on this? Jim, yes?
I notice on here that most all of the people in your audience here are women. So this is interesting.
So be careful.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's one of the first two. I think she was very serious about what she was saying. I don't know whether it's because she was, quotation marks, tamed, and I don't know whether it's quotation marks that she fell in love with him, because there's no indication, I don't think, in the play that she really fell in love with him. But I think she had to grow some from a apparently teenage girl into a young woman, probably a settling down of hormones and whatever, and a realization that she was going to be living with this guy for the rest of her life. And she needed to make things bearable for both of them.
Yeah.
And I think, and at that time, of course, it's pretty much in line with what the Christian teachings have been all along. And I think she just felt that she would be happier under these new circumstances, and probably felt that maybe that he would be happier.
Okay.
And she didn't want to really be starved to death either for very much longer.
No, that would not be good. That would not be good. She likes her meat. Yes. I think there may be something to that. The thing is, in England at that time, there was no crime in being a shrew, certainly frowned upon, but it was no crime. But if you were a scold, if you had language and you had speech that simply could not be controlled in the public sphere, you really were liable to be controlled by public authorities. You might be put into a kind of stocks, kind of device. They call it a shrew's fiddle. And it would, there would be a hole in which you'd have your neck. There'd be smaller holes for your wrists. And I think there would actually be a metal bit they would put in your mouth that would really prevent you from making any kind of sound, whatever. Truly, it would really tamp down whatever scolding impulses you might have. And you would be the public. This would be in public. This would be something that the public would be able to see, and would be the butt of that kind of public ridicule. And then there was something that was known as a kind of like a ducking school, or I think they even called it a cucking stool, in which you would actually be dunked in a stream on this stool that sort of lowered by a lever or by pulleys, what have you, and you would be drenched in a very unpleasant way by having mouthed off just a little too much in the public sphere. This was something that was done to discipline women who simply could not be controlled in terms of their speech. This was a legal recourse people had at that time. So yeah, and what Jim mentions about the ideas and in terms of the Christian doctrine to, that the, the notion of being subservient to the husband. I mean, I think it's in one of the letters of St. Paul in the New Testament. This is definitely something that's in the kind of in the liturgy of the marriage ceremony of the time. So it's definitely an issue that would have been current in terms of the way the gender roles were looked at in England of Shakespeare's time. So you could very well consider Katharina really to be a character out of her time in a way. She's a character who really belongs in a future era, in a future society that is able to deal with a woman of that temperament. They couldn't deal with that temperament in Elizabethan England, even though they had a queen who certainly was someone with a certain strong temperament. But we'll leave that hypocrisy go for a moment. Meanwhile, those who did not have that kind of august title, they had to be a little more careful the way they comported themselves in public. So, in a sense, Katharina is simply saying in this monologue the basic acceptable party line for behavior of that day. And I would say probably in Shakespeare's day, people probably in the globe probably were simply nodding their heads in recognition. Nothing shocking to them. It's only because gender roles and attitudes have changed over the last 400 years. I think they'd even changed 300 years after Shakespeare, that people start looking at this play in a very different light. Any other reactions to this monologue that we want to express?
Well, I should probably stay muted, considering all this topic is going, where this topic is going.
No, come on.
We're
friends here.
We watched the Stratford production, and at the end, the two were just embracing and happy together. And then we watched Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor's version of it, okay? And at the end, I just think it's so cute. He doesn't know where she's gone. She's walked out of the room, and he has to follow her. So I think that's kind of a little message at the end that
different view about where this marriage is going at the end of that version. Yes. And of course we know that that was a famously passionate and combative couple, they provided endless material for the tabloids during their 2 marriages, I think. And I think that in a sense they played up to that view of those characters in real life. Yes.
Can you answer an unrelated question? Why did Robert Greene call Shakespeare an upstart crow? What is a crow?
Well, I found that in one of these little books I have. Let me see if I have the quotation. Gee, I don't know if I have it right at the top of my thing here. Just a moment here. Robert Greene, yes.
Can I just say while you're looking that I didn't watch the whole Zeffirelli film. On YouTube, they'll show you the final speech with Elizabeth Taylor. And, I noticed that in line with that, what I had read critics saying about the power, that she does have power in the end. Elizabeth Taylor portrays it very stoically, I think. Very, she doesn't use a lot of emotion, like it's almost like she's saying these words, but she doesn't really believe it in a way.
Okay.
Was how I took it. And I didn't see the very end where she walks out because I think I just stopped it at some point. But
Okay.
but yeah, I thought it was a different kind of portrayal also. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, this is kind of, in the, this film was made in the aftermath of Betty Friedan's the feminine mystique, sort of the dawn of the age of women's liberation. It's certainly possible that, that film was made, in the cultural temper of that movement. Certainly possible that that might be the case in terms of the way that scene was directed and performed. Anyway, here's Robert Greene, in the early 1590s, in which he, in a pamphlet called A Groat's Worth of Wit, he says, "There is an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers, that with his tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide, supposes he is as well able to bombast out a blank verse as the best of you, and being an absolute Johannes factotum, is in his own conceit the only shake scene in a country." So that's the first appearance of William Shakespeare in the public print in the early 1590s. And that attributed to the writer Robert Greene, who plays a supporting role in this little comedy series on PBS, Upstart Crow. And he's this continual irritant in that TV Shakespeare's side. And I just love his little affected way of talking and his little innuendos about the Mr. Shakespeare and just all that stuff. Yes, Mary Lou, yes.
Well, again, we have to take this in the context of the time that it was written and portrayed, but maybe it was Shakespeare's cookie to the future of women's liberation. Not that men would take her speech as, yes, this is how a woman should behave, but planting the seed in women's minds to think about it.
Yeah, and a lot of critics say that this kind of character portrayal is so different from some of the other very independent-minded female protagonists in his later comedies, like Beatrice, as you mentioned. Juliet is a very independent-minded teenager, and there's the Viola in Twelfth Night, and there are other, and of course Rosalind and As You Like It. It does seem like Katharina is a little bit of a kind of a throwback in a way. Again, he inherits this plot, from ancient, sort of this sort of, again, war between the sexes kind of a folk tale, and he makes the best of it as he can. I think he tries to give Katharina a personality where she gives as good as she takes in her verbal duos with Petruchio. She really tries to, give her as much of an even standing as is possible, at least in that context. But the notion that maybe he is thinking about, another time when this character might be looked at in a slightly different way, that's certainly possible. But again, in the short term, he really did have to think about the audiences that he was writing for at the present. So it's kind of an interesting double-edged sword. In any case, we are kind of up against it in terms of time. In our few remaining minutes, I'm just wondering if any of you would like to offer your views about the Stratford Festival production. This thing was done in 2015. I'm thinking that even just 5 years difference, I'm even wondering if it would be harder in 2020 to do that same production, if they would have second or third thoughts about doing it at this time. I'm thinking even 5 years difference in terms of gender identity attitudes. Things have changed a lot in just 5 years. I myself laughed myself silly through the entire thing. I have to confess, but then I'm an unregenerate chauvinist pig. You know, let's put it that way. That's just me. But some of you, I'm sure, might have had a different point of view. Anyways, anyone want to weigh in on the success or lack of success of this Stratford Festival production?
Stratford's audiences are getting older, as are we. So I think the play is certainly appropriate for the age of the audience. I haven't seen too many young people. There's no baby boomers in the audience that I've seen every time we've been there. Because I'm also a singer, and I notice our audience is getting grayer and grayer.
Alas, alas, yes.
Poor
So we don't know what an audience of boomers or zoomers or whatever Gen Xers would how they would react. But yeah, maybe for that older demographic, maybe that production was welcome as morning rain, as they say. Any other thoughts about the production?
I enjoyed it. I thought they did a good performance. You know, it was humorous in a lot of places, and you know, I think there's the problem that we talked about, but otherwise the performance was good. All the actors I thought were very, very good.
Yeah. I call that problem the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the way it is with these problem plays. There's always an elephant in the room. Yes. Well, anyways, I had a grand old time, but again, take that with 2 grains of salt. But I think after all the tragedies that we've endured over the last 12 weeks, I think we deserved to have a few horse laughs. And we, and I think the production provided a few. But by the way, I have to let you know that the way, they opened that production was very, very unusual, because again, that opening bit is this induction, this sort of play outside the main play. But it's like they had an additional layer on top of that, because they didn't start with Shakespeare's original opening of the induction, but they made their own opening, and they created this bizarre character, their own version of Christopher Sly, who they portray as this obnoxious theater blogger who is just completely opposed to any kind of revisionist view of the Taming of the Shrew, among his other theatrical, bugbears. And then midway through his little rant, he falls down, seemingly dead drunk, on the stage, and they suddenly go into Shakespeare's scene of the original version of Christopher Sly. Yes, Linda.
My favorite quote was, "Some of my best friends are Canadians."
Yes. What I think is truly amazing is that the portrayer of Christopher Sly in this production was also the person who played Petruchio in the regular play within the play, Ben Carlson. And I would say it's very rare that you see that kind of doubling of Christopher Sly and Petruchio. So I thought that was a true tour de force, not just for him as an actor, but for the costume and makeup and hairstyle people to get him to look entirely different for the main character he had to play in the performance. Just amazing. They had a grand old time doing that induction. I would say there's probably a lot of cases where Taming of the Shrew is done without that opening induction. Oftentimes, that is deleted. I mean, in the Franco Zeffirelli film, they don't have that introductory scene, and I think there are other renderings where they leave that out entirely. I think one of the things that it's nice to have that for is that the whole show, all the different layers, whether it's the Petruchio Caterina thing, or it's the subplot with Lucentio and the other suitors who are wooing Bianca, the younger daughter, and the Christopher Sly scene. It all deals with transformations of personality and identity. Christopher Sly is transformed, at least in his imagination, into a lord, and then back again into a drunken slob at the end. Lucentio makes believe that he is a linguistics professor, and his servant, his underling, portrays Lucentio. So the servant becomes the master in a sense, and this Hortensio also goes in disguise to woo Bianca as a music master, and they get a strolling pedant or teacher to portray Lucentio's father, Vincencio, and so that he can vouch for Lucentio with Baptista to provide the surety that he will have enough wealth for Bianca, and then that whole thing is foiled by the fact that the real Vincencio, the real father of Lucentio, eventually shows up. All these different changes of identity in that subplot. And then there's Caterina, who actually does make a real transformation, not just a fake transformation, from the shrew at the beginning of the play to the compliant Caterina at the end of the play. So you could say that this entire play is about transformations, disguises of one sort or another. And what is a real transformation? What is a real change? And that's one of the things that underneath this piece plays with. We see a lot of people making believe that they're other things other than what they really are. And another question is whether Petruchio really is this kind of person with a lot of bravado and self-confidence and someone able to manipulate people. Is he really that person, or is he someone who really falls in love with Caterina? Is he simply trying to put this aggressive woman under his thumb, or does he really start to fall in love with her as a real husband would? That's another question, whether that is a real transformation at the end of the play or not. I think in this production, I thought it was a real transformation. And I think both Caterina and Petruchio, in this production at least, were pleasantly surprised that this transformation took place. In the midst of all the other false transformations in the play, I think in this production at least, this was a case of two people experiencing a real transformation. And I think that's really a good way to play it, because then the applause at the end really does have a sense of a real fulfillment. Otherwise, I think it leaves the audience with a real sour feeling at the end of the play. And I think in this case, I think there was a sense that there had been a problem, and somehow I think the problem had been, at least, if not solved, at least it was brought under some kind of measurable control. You get a sense that these are never going to be characters who are always going to be in complete simpatico with one another. There are always going to be fights and arguments, and there are always going to be cases where one is, has the upper hand and one has the lower hand, and then it'll be reversed. There always will be that kind of sense of struggle in terms of who has the upper hand in the relationship. But you get a sense that for both of them, that they're up to that challenge, and that might be a more realistic way of looking at this institution of marriage. Not someone who is on top all the time, one person who is subservient, but as a case where you take turns being subservient and take turns being, in control. So it may have started out as a farce, but you could very well say that because Shakespeare was an extraordinary playwright and imagination, he might have made a case for a more realistic look at what a real marriage is. So that's my take at it. And I think before I go, I'd like to give my mom, who has been sitting here patiently, the chance to say farewell to all of you.